What I'd like to do now is turn over. What we have in front of you today is all four of us are actually in relatively new positions, all within the last 6 months. One of the things I think you'll see as you hear what we all have to say and listen to these ladies really talk about where they got and how they got here is that innovation isn't just about technology, and being on the cutting edge means also staying on the cutting edge of your career. So as those of you who are just thinking about it, or those of you who are mid-career, just remember it's never too late. You can always make changes and you can always move forward. We were laughing a few minutes ago and I said if anybody had asked me 10 years ago if I would found a software company, and I am not one of those people who has a STEM degree, I would have laughed. So you never know where you're going to be or why you're going to be there. So pay attention to those who have gotten where they have and learn from them where you can. So with that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask each of the panelists if they would just take 2 minutes and do something similar to what I just did, which is say who they are, who their company is, and what that company does, or the organization within the company that they're working for. And then we'll go ahead and get started with the panel. And I'm going to go ahead and start with Amy.
Thank you. And I get the great microphone tonight, so if I break out into song, you'll know what happened. So my name is Amy O'Connor, and I work for a small company based out of Palo Alto, California called Cloudera. Cloudera actually productizes the software that originally came from Google that enables the big data. So it's the original software company that's inside now 200 enterprise multi-petabyte type sites all over the world. As Michele said, it's a fairly new job. I started on September 4th. And my role is Big Data Evangelist. Prior to joining Cloudera, I was with Nokia for a few years where we built out a multi-petabyte big data platform. Yes, we did analyze a little of that data that comes off the phone. So I had a little bit of a wild ride with that, and then recently left to join this company. I'm a big data evangelist, which means in 2 weeks, I've already racked up 10,000 air miles and I need to get on a flight at 6 a.m. So that's what I do, and it's a lot of fun.
Well, good evening, everybody. By the way, I'm just back from India, so I think it's evening. It could be morning for me. I'm Lauren States. I'm a vice president at IBM. I'm in the IBM software business, and I run our strategy and transformation for our global sales organization. I know you all know IBM, but just a little bit about IBM. The IBM I work in our software business. We are about a $20 billion business, and we've got 9 product lines across a broad range of capability. We've got an 18,000 person sales force, and we do business in 175 countries around the world. So my job is to not only work on all of our strategic planning, budgeting, but also our sales deployment model, our coverage model, and our go-to-market model, particularly as the industry shifts into some of the new technologies that we'll talk about tonight. I've been with IBM for 35 years. I intended to only work there for 2 years. And I actually married an IBMer. He was there for 33 years, so we have 68 years of IBM experience in our household. But as I'll talk tonight, it's been really terrific because there have been so many different opportunities to work in so many different roles across the company that I feel that although I've been in the same company, I've worked in several companies within a company. So thank you very much. And thank you, Hugh. I also want to mention that I'm on the Northeastern DeMoore-McKim Board of Visitors, which is a committee that we have to help the business school do strategic planning. And I was named executive chair about 2 or 3 years ago, and it's quite an honor to serve in that role. So thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lynne Wilson. I am a former CEO of a division of a software company called Dassault Systémes. That's French. Because most people can't say that, we refer to ourselves as 3DS or DS in the States. And just a little bit of background about the company. It's about $2.5 billion, 10,000 people around the world, and we are leaders in 3D design, development, data management. So if you drive a car, if you take an airplane, or if you pour water from a beautiful pitcher, chances are it started out as a 3D model somewhere. And we help create the product and manage the design process so that things are produced efficiently, global sourcing. So it's a really interesting company that not that many people here in the US have heard of. My job, I joined to start a new division called 3D Via, which no one, including my mother, can say. She's like, what is it, 3D Via? I'm like, no, it's the way to 3D. And what I do and what I've done in my career is really take new technologies and try and bring them to new markets and consumer space. So all the high-powered engineering, cool stuff you do to design an airplane, I want to put that in consumers' hands so that we can do 3D printing. We can try on clothes on something that resembles ourselves before you have to send out mail orders. So I'm on the cutting edge of the consumer space. I recently took a new job at DS2. I spent 7 years as the CEO of my division. And what I've done is the way to really grow my brand was to put my products in the main company. And we've reconfigured, and now I'm the chief strategist for consumer applications. So if anybody has any ideas about cool things to do in the consumer space, especially women, please come talk to me.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, ladies. So I have asked each of these women to give me a sense of what are some of the key questions that they'd like to answer for you tonight. And we're going to be asking them not all necessarily the same questions, but they're going to pipe in on different ones. But I'm going to start with one that I'm going to ask each of you to answer, which explicitly is for those of us in the room who have not necessarily done it this way, or for those of us who are thinking about doing it this way, how did you get where you got? Amy, you want to start?
Okay, great question. And it's not a ladder. It is much more like a jungle gym. I started years and years ago with an electrical engineering and computer science degree. Ended up working for a company that no longer exists, but Data General. And I was one of those people in a cube writing software. And I would stick my head out of that cube and say, who's going to use this software anyways? Why would someone buy this? What kind of product is going to be in? And my manager would say, go back and write some more code. And I think I probably wasn't that great at writing code because I would come back out again and ask the same questions. So eventually I made my way through the management ranks of engineering, and then I popped over to what my husband calls the dark side. So I moved over to the business side, took a couple strategy roles, and I realized that at that point in time, I started referring to myself as the geek in high heels, because I could talk to engineers about anything that they were building and translate it for folks in the business and explain it in plain English for folks in the business. I ended up getting a VP of marketing role in a $5 billion business. And at that point in time, I realized I don't have the formal education to do this. So I was relying upon my own experiences, and I really wanted some more tools in my pocket. So a few years ago, just a couple years ago now, I came back to Northeastern and I entered the executive MBA program and had an absolutely fabulous 16 months where I learned a lot. And I've told folks this, I think I learned more about myself than I learned about the subject matter. So when I was in that program, I ended up joining Nokia. One of the things that I learned through the executive MBA program was just a lot more about dealing with different cultures and getting to understand the world and globalization, which was a great thing to have done prior to joining Nokia, based out of Finland, offices all in Germany, all over the world. I did one 22,000-mile trip around the world in that period of time and just met so many different folks. My role there was I was the senior director of big data analytics. It was kind of early on when folks were first just starting to think about what big data was, and I think we'll probably talk about that a little bit more. So I was there for 3 years or so, and then, as I said, just a couple weeks ago, I joined Cloudera. So it was kind of a wild ride, engineering into strategy, back to school, marketing, and now big data, kind of all over the place.
Great, thank you. Lauren.
Well, I was telling Michele earlier that when I was in high school, I really liked math, and this was back in the 70s. And so I went to Girls Catholic High School, and the nuns, they humored me until I told them that I was actually going to do something with math. I didn't know what it was, so following my father's footsteps, I went to the Wharton School, and I studied accounting. That lasted, apologized to the accountants in the room, for only about 1 semester. I blamed my father because he would go back and grade my tests and give me an F. It wasn't very helpful. I think he thought he was being helpful. So I switched over to what would be a data science degree today. It was a decision sciences and statistics degree. And so when I graduated, I joined IBM. I was attracted to working with clients, with technology. And so I worked in mainframe systems for many years, working with clients in distribution, finance, and other industries, helping them apply and implement technology within their own companies. My favorite job was installing printers. This goes back many years in the Paramount Picture studio lot and getting to meet the Fonz, you know, and it was Sylvester Stallone and everybody while I was busy doing that work. But later, I was similar, I think, to you in that I really liked the technical work, but my boss pushed me to work in management, and I loved it from the day I started. I really like working with people. I like that part of it. And so I started going up through the technical and sales management ranks. And in that time when IBM was in a transition, I switched out to work in new technologies. I really like working in the growth areas. So I worked for a startup within IBM, which was really a fascinating experience to learn how to run a company within a big company and help this company thrive and grow. And after I did that, I came out to work for the executive vice president of manufacturing and research, Nick D'Onofrio, for the IBMers in the room, who really encouraged me to be or do anything I wanted to do. Really, really great individual. So from that, I came back out into sales. I ran our global sales organization, built it up from scratch. I did a lot of fun projects. I opened a solution center in South Africa. I helped the Chinese banks get ready for the Olympics, and a lot of really fun special projects. And just as I was having the time of my life, I got a call from my boss and said, the chairman wants you to work on a transformation project in corporate. I'm like, oh, I don't want to work in corporate, but this transformation project was actually one of the best experiences that I ever worked on, just working across the whole complicated IBM and understanding how to affect change and make a material difference. Coming out of that, I went back to technology and helped start our cloud business within IBM. And then I went back into strategy to help direct our not only our technology, but our business strategy, because a lot of these new technologies have incredibly different business models from the traditional tech fields that we've been working in for years. And then just in May, our senior vice president asked me to come back into Software Group to implement all the strategies that I had been telling him he needed to do for the past 2 years. And so I've come back to work in the sales organization to help really do a lot of sales operations and sales management work, but really the most exciting part is to try to take a big organization with a traditional go-to-market and flip the go-to-market to the new technologies while maintaining our business performance in our existing business. And so that's been my career, moving all over one company, but working globally, locally, line staff, sales, development, strategy, et cetera, et cetera. It's really been fabulous.
Excellent. Thank you. Lynn.
Okay, so I think my career is the complete opposite. I'm not going to do my resume because you can all go look on LinkedIn, but I've had the fortune or opportunity to work for probably, depending on how you count, 10 to 12 different companies in 30 years. Now, that doesn't mean I can't commit to things, because I've been happily married to the same wonderful guy for 30 years. I have children, they're still my children. I had no idea what I was going to do. I studied economics in college. I started out as engineering, but I wanted to travel. I was a scholarship kid. So the way I could travel was to change majors, so I did that. And somehow I ended up at Harvard Business School. And the reason I want to bring this up is my grandparents came to this country on boats. My parents did not go to college. I'm the first generation to go to college. And there I am, like at Harvard Business School. And I will say I was academically and intellectually okay, but I was not socialized to be a CEO. I didn't have role models to be a CEO. I didn't have mentors. I just kind of had to learn it at the age of 24, 26. And the reason I bring that up is it was not an easy or pleasant experience for me. And when I was graduating, I said, I want to be as far away from people and as far away from people like you as I can possibly be. I want to just go sit in a cube and do something, and I don't want anyone to talk to me. So I started a digital. I actually did get a job there. I was trying to manage my husband's medical school and my first job. I started a digital, and I don't know what happened. I learned that I loved business. My colleagues were in a consulting group, and they were writing reports, and somehow I got on a project, and I said, there's a better way to manufacture this thing, and I had all these ideas about how to change a business and how to start something, and I realized that that was ultimately what I was going to be good at. I love the early stage. I left digital because I didn't like hardware. I wanted to go to software. I went to a crazy artificial intelligence startup when I was, back in AI. You probably know AI. Anyway, it wasn't a common thing. And then I ended up getting acquired. I went to Lotus. I spent 7 years at Lotus, and that was a wonderful experience because we had management training. We were growing so fast. You couldn't find people who were good enough quickly, and we had a fabulous CEO who believed in management development. So, I had jobs where I jumped in, I saw an opportunity, I got in a growth sector. That's a wonderful thing about STEM. I think we've heard that, is it's growing and you can compete on your brain, which for a woman or for a woman in business, I think is really important. So I loved software. I loved the early stage. I found I had a knack for thinking about things a little bit differently. And from some of my mentors, I learned that I could make a team out of anything. And I don't know where that came from, but it's something that served me really well. Listen, 2 ears, 1 mouth, listen, get people talking. And so that's how I am where I am. And I recently changed my position, as I said, because I'm looking for the next new thing for my company. And that's what I love to do. So I've gone from a big division to a small team. Back to corporate.
Back to corporate. We all have to go back.
Yeah, we do.
Excellent, great. So I'm going to go ahead and pose a couple of questions to the team at different points in time, but please, we do want this to be interactive. I've cleared it with everybody. They're fine answering questions that you ask. So I'll go ahead and get started, but if there's a question or a follow-up that you want, please just raise your hand. I'll go ahead. You want to go ahead and get started?
Sorry, I was just curious. So as a freshman starting off in the business world, I was just curious, what are some specific challenges you guys have had to face in the business world, and what did you guys do to kind of, you explained how you got here right now, but what have been some things you have to deal with?
Anybody want to take that?
I've been working in the business world for about 35 years, and I think, in the early days, being one of the only women, working in technology, and one of the only women in our starting training class, although we do have a fairly rich mix of women in IBM, one of the things I saw was that the more choice assignments might go to the guys, even if they were not even as highly educated as I was. And so early in my career, I decided, look, I'm just going to produce good results, and I'm going to hope that good results matter. And for a while, that worked for me until I was sometime in my 40s, and I had the best piece of advice that I ever got from a really great leader. Some of the IBMers in the room might know Charlie Ill. He said to me one day, he said, you think you do really good work and it matters and it really does matter, but you never advocate for yourself. And it's probably because you think advocating for yourself is disgusting, right? And I said, that's right, it's disgusting. I'm glad you know that, Charlie. And so he said, but you don't have the right not to advocate for the people who work for you. In other words, what he said to me is, you have to have power on behalf of the people who work for you. You owe it to them. For me, that reframed everything, because then I realized I wasn't really working on my own behalf as much as I was working on behalf of, at that time, about 3,000 or 4,000 people. And I owed it to them to have a position of power in the organization so that they could flourish. And so, I think you always have to do a good job and be excellent, take risk, speak up, don't let people marginalize you, be relevant in the room. But for me, that moment that really changed everything was the fact that I could be aggressive about it in a frame that worked for me personally.
I think I would add one thing to that too. If you can really think about who you are, what makes you who you are, what makes you unique, and focus on that and have those things come to the table, no matter what it is, we're all different people and we have something different to contribute. So the more you understand about yourself, the more you can bring to the table for whoever you're working for. So if you can marry those two concepts together, that's very powerful.
Because we're doing streaming video, just remember to the mic, and we'll probably, if we do more Q&A, we'll have to bring the thing up, just so that the streaming video is audible.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So I feel compelled. So I guess what I would suggest is, and I say this especially to women, but I say it to every person of every gender and any age, is when you first start out, I think you're socialized in an academic setting and you want to get a good job, or you want to get into a good school, you want to get a good grade, you want to get a good job. And so we're socialized to like do a good job. And I see a lot of women who are really smart, but they don't have a clue about where to start in the business world. So I try and say, you can't just do a good job. You can't do something really well. You have to do something important really well. And that means whatever organization you join, I don't care if it's a sports team or if it's, a multinational company, try and figure out what drives that business. And then try, and it might not be your first job, but you can meet people who will help you ferret out what it is that drives the business and learn about it and make relationships. And so don't just do a good job. Do a really important job and do that well. And that's what I would, I think it's really important. So.
Great. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and ask some of the questions that have come up previously. So one of the most important ones I think that we're all dealing with today is globalization, and I think both Amy and Lauren are going to spend just a few minutes. So the question, I believe, is how has globalization impacted you, your career, and your business in the last few years?
So I mentioned a little bit earlier working for Nokia, which is a very global company, and I saw an impact in a number of different places. So first of all was just that you have competitors from countries that you never used to think about before, and clearly from Nokia's perspective, some of the manufacturers that were popping up in China was very interesting. The second thing is that when you're making product, you actually have to think about, is this product applicable in a local market that's somewhere else in the world? So, years ago we made product for the US, by the US, in the US, and it's no longer like that. And you've got to be able to do a lot of customization and understand local markets. You've got to be able to expand your sales force into other countries. And someone from the US can't necessarily go into Europe or into a developing nation to sell. So you need to be able to expand your business that way. And then one of the biggest ones is just regulatory policy. As you start thinking about product, and in particular, when we talk about data and big data, there's an awful lot of privacy policy around it. There's a lot of intellectual property protection that's got to be taken into consideration. So even though we think of the world now at a global level, it still is country by country, region by region, city by city. When you think about putting your product in there, putting your sales force in there, dealing with local regulatory compliance and all of that kind of stuff.
Right. Lauren?
Yeah, and I would just supplement that with a couple of points about doing business globally personally. So when I first took my global job in 2001 or 2, the first thing I noticed was that every meeting keeps going around the clock and there's no time to sleep, right? And so it was like, now it seems normal, but it was a never-ending stream of things to do. And so it took some adjustment to understand how to work in a continuous follow-the-clock environment. But what I did was, I was very lucky. I actually built our global pre-sales team for our software business. We started with about 1,400 people, mostly in the United States and Europe, and we built it to about 5,000 people before I moved on. And what I did was, I went in each country and I worked beside the team, and I immersed myself with the team so I could feel what is it like to travel to the customer? What is it like to meet with the customer? What is it like to receive everything that we think of in New York out there, in the line where they've got so many things coming at them. What are people worried about? Who do they need to talk to? And what I found it's been for me about 15 years working globally, is that you can actually really become a global citizen. You don't have to read all the books and think, don't do this, don't do that. Because if you're in a country and people see that you're trying, they'll forgive you for the mistakes that you might make in terms of etiquette. And you can actually really connect with them so that when you go back and work in New York, you can accurately reflect, this is how the market works. And so, we've done a lot of work in our company to have global processes and consistency and to promote diversity and have global teams work together. But I would just say that on a personal level, the more that you can work out in the countries with people and be part of who they are, it'll just come back to you a million times in terms of, feeling of accomplishment, good things for the business and also good things for the people and what they're trying to achieve.
Lynn, you work for a French company. Anything you would want to add to that?
Don't join a French company July 28th because they all take August off, and I did that, and no one told me that. So I was like, okay, I'm here. No, I think I would just really echo the words that were just said. They're brilliant. It's like walking the other person's shoes. I think I've done a really good job trying to understand the French and the French culture, but we're a global company, so it's not just understand the French, it's travel the world, have the same log of miles, and people do forgive you. It's about, do you try and understand, and make people, and people actually try to adapt more to me than I want to adapt to them, but there's a lot of, especially in some other cultures, you come in and you're the big cheese, and they want to entertain you in a Western style, and it's like in Korea they spent 25 minutes trying to get a table and chairs because they were afraid I wouldn't sit on the floor, and I'm like, I do yoga, I can sit on the floor. But anyway, it's like it's about people, and I think it's a skill that women have uniquely. I'm not saying anything negative about men, but I think just the concern you showed for how you build a global team and get them energized, I thought that was brilliant.
Do they make you do that little drink where you're the only one and each one gives you this drink and it's a 200% alcohol? One of the guys next to me said to me quietly, you could die. Thank you. I'm now allergic to alcohol. I forgot to tell you.
Right.
All right, great. Well, I'd like to spend a few minutes on innovation and trends and kind of get slightly different perspectives from each of you on this. So I'd actually kind of like to start with Lynn and say, what is one of the top trends in your field that you think that leaders today should have on their radar?
So I have two answers to that. We have some big data people here, but I mean, big data is a huge trend. I am not a data scientist, but I know that everything we're doing and thinking and have thought is recorded somewhere. But what I'm trying to challenge people or my team is don't lose, there's the back of the envelope too. And when you enter an organization or you think about problems, just make sure you have your simple checklist about what you think is important, and then test it or validate it with the big data. Watch people's behavior. That's one trend. And the only other trend is sort of specific to my field, which is we're in 3D, we're in creation, we're in design. So there's all this stuff going on with 3D printing where anybody in the room will be able to, manufacture or create a product, potentially on demand. You might have a 3D printer toaster in your kitchen someday that's going to make your shoes, I don't know. But, there is this sense that you're going to empower people to work very differently and start new kinds of businesses. And it's the power of the crowd, and we don't know exactly where it's going to go.
Great. So Lauren, what are some of the, what trend do you think will have the largest commercial benefit and impact?
So I was really lucky. I spent the past 2.5 years working in strategy as our CTO. That, by the way, was a really challenging job for me because I'm not a CTO. I'm more of a business technologist, but that's one of the great things about our company. which is they push you into jobs that, your heart stops. And you say, I don't know if I can do this, but, you can do it, and then you change. So I've been looking at cloud, big data, analytics, social, mobile, digitization of content. And I actually have come to the conclusion that it's one thing, not 4 or 5 things. And it's different faces of the same thing. And when we look back 10 years from now, we'll say, oh, that makes sense. Just like, for those of you who are old enough, if you look back at client server in the first days, to be able to do your own spreadsheet on your own computer seemed to be so empowering. And, now, people carry iPads down in the theater. I do a lot of work with the U.S. Army and the Department of Defense, and what you can do with technology just was not imagined. So the way I rationalize those 4 trends is I think of it this way. I think actually big data is the dark horse. We've been talking about cloud for the past 5 years, but I think actually the dark horse in all of this is the big data. And what the cloud gives you is the time to value, the delivery speed. So the cloud is about speed. The mobile is about the user experience. It's also an accelerant to the big data. And the social is about redoing people-related processes, which is also an accelerant to the big data. So all these things together, I think, make up one trend. And it's been hard to figure out how cloud will monetize it. I see one of my colleagues, Lorraine from Raceme, we've been working on the cloud together for now about 4 years, and the cloud business models are very confusing in terms of monetization, margin, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look up what we say in technology, up the stack, and you look at the real value, I think the value will be in the insight, the data, the interaction, the people-related processes all together. But I think, Michele, they'll be indistinguishable in 5 years. Today, they seem like different things.
Cool.
Yeah,
Amy?
I would have to just add a little to that. I agree, and it's the innovation that happened in the last decade was all around communication. And if you went back 10 years, people talked about the internet and HTTP and then web browsers, and now we just don't think about it at all. Now we just communicate with all of these different technologies. So clearly, cloud is a really great answer for time to market. So if you want to start a company these days, you can go to Workday, not have to worry about financial department and HR department. There's things that are implemented for you. You can go to Salesforce. So it's really driven the barrier to entry for folks that want to be entrepreneurial to get into business. And then you can just obviously build your own data centers out there in some virtualized cloud environment. With respect to big data, I view it as a way to create personalized experiences. So we kind of went through this whole phase of talking about globalization. And I think the first wave of globalization, when you think of the book, The World is Flat, was really about making everything kind of the same. And then folks started talking about localization. You can kind of look at Procter & Gamble versus Unilever and their approaches to market. Well, big data is all about activity data. It's all about, the first wave of it was really social data. What are people typing? And what can you learn from the trends of what they're typing? And the next wave of it is all about sensors. So how are we interacting with the physical world? And all of those interactions mean that products can therefore then be personalized, as long as we get through the privacy aspects of all that. And then I totally agree. 3D printing, I think, is the next wave of big innovation, because 3D printing enables you to do customized and local manufacturing. So you can think about it in a completely different way. And the idea of printing shoes was my idea.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah, I mean,
She already patented it. I just want
I'm quite comfortable enough, so I figured if I could print my own shoes, I could customize them a little bit. But I think those trends are all coming together, and they're all bringing down the barrier to entry for people to create new and innovative products, and to get to market much more quickly for those products and make them much more personalized.
Great. Thank you very much. So in order to sort of manage the mics and make sure that everything hits the streaming data, I'm just going to go ahead and keep asking questions, and then at the end we'll give everybody a chance to pop in with some questions, if that's okay. So what I'd like to do now is talk just a little, we've spent a little bit of time early on your career. What I'd like to really talk about some is leadership. And I know one of the questions, and this was actually a good discussion that we had a little bit earlier tonight, I'd like to talk about mentoring. and have each of these folks, if they don't mind, talk to us a little bit about how, did you have a mentor? If so, what role did they play in your life? How do you think about mentoring, and do you mentor today? So just sort of weave it all into a response, and why don't we go ahead and get started, Lynne, with you?
Okay, so when I was on this panel, I said I should make sure I understand the definition of mentor. So for me, I have not had any single person in my life who's like my Yoda that I go to. I have always thought that's what mentor was, like what was wrong, I didn't have Yoda. But what I did have is, and if you look up mentor, it's about people who can give you advice at certain times and you have to learn. What I did have is sort of 3 phases in my career where my professors in school, in business school, said 3 things that stayed with me. One was, if you manage the business, your career will take care of itself. So it's like, stop worrying about your career and just try and figure out, which is why I was saying plug into the business. They also said, make sure you have your walking money, because business is complicated, and sometimes you could be in situations that you don't want to. Your integrity is everything, and as you're starting out, just make sure that you can, move to something if you need to disengage from a company or a team that you're not happy with. So that was one thing. The next thing was one of my first bosses at Lotus, who, like I said, he told me what I think one of my greatest strengths is, which is I can build a team out of anything. I can get 50 people who don't speak the same language, don't share anything, and we will sit and we will figure out something we're going to do together, and it will happen. It doesn't always happen at the right time or at the right scale, but something happens. And then I guess the last thing I would say is I had a fabulous boss when I was at Fidelity, and we were in a situation where something had gone wrong. It wasn't necessarily me, but I was the one who found out about it. And so I went to this gentleman and I said, look, boss, something's gone wrong and I need you to know about it. And so within 2 seconds, he picked up the phone and he called the head of whatever at Fidelity, and told him what was going on. And he said, and the guy on the phone was like, well, who did it? Who did it? And my boss stood there and he said, it doesn't matter who did it. It's my ship. It's my watch. I'm responsible. I take responsibility. And I said, for me, that was so empowering to see this. People are always trying to throw people under the bus and say, oh, it wasn't me, it was you. It was you. It was him. And he just stood there and stood up and said, you know what, this is my organization, my responsibility. I'll deal with it. You don't need to know. And I said, that is the kind of leader I want to be. That's how I want to advocate for my people. And we're all still friends, but to me, those were what did I hear from business? What was my first boss? And then who did I see who was a leader, who I said, that is a phenomenal leader. I want to be like him. So,
Cool. Amy.
I also never had one particular mentor. I think as my career changed over the years, as I was looking for a different opportunity, I'm always trying to learn the next thing. I would just look out into the business and find somebody who was a good leader, and really get to know them, get to understand what they were about. And so over the course of the years, there were a number of different people that functioned in that mentoring role for me, whether it was technical stuff on the side of the business, explaining to me how the sales force worked, or someone who was a little bit more on the soft side of some of the leadership things. I just continually changed and always looked to expand my network and have someone different who would be out there that I could learn from. I think there was one particular time when I was assigned to a formal role with someone who was supposed to mentor me, a woman who was in sales, and the only advice I got from her was around clothes. And I was in engineering at the time, okay. So it actually was good advice. So I think, anything that you get along the way, keep your mind open and your ears open, and you learn things from people that are all around you.
That's great. Lauren.
Yeah, so I'll just add a couple thoughts. So I like to think of a mentor relationships as like a board of directors. So you have a whole set of different needs, and there are different people who can serve those needs for you, and they might just serve them in a moment, and they might serve them for a lifetime, and they might be a superior or a colleague or somebody who works for you or somebody who works in the organization or in your family. I think I had a couple great mentor moments I want to share. The first one was when I became a working mother, and I decided pretty quickly that I was about one of the worst working mothers on the history of the planet. I couldn't do anything. And so we have these really fabulous diversity groups within IBM, and one of the diversity groups was women. And we were talking about having children, and everybody had the same problem that I had. And I learned, well, you're not special, that's just normal. And so for me, that was a mentoring moment, which, was just the moment that it happened. And so I learned that instead of being fixated on one person being my mentor, because similar to you, I had a head of sales, female, assigned to me as a mentor, and we just never hit it off. So it was an official paper relationship, but it didn't really help. The other nuance I want to add to the conversation is this idea of a sponsor. A sponsor is somebody who's much more invisible. These are the people who speak on your behalf when you're not there. These are the people who, when you're put up for a promotion, either will push you or pull you, depending on what their position is. And you can't really tell who the sponsors are. I think really some people never surface. The first time I ever even understood this notion of sponsor, I was out in Chicago, and one of the development executives came out. His name was Don Hiley, also worked at Fidelity for many years. And he said, I when your name came up, I said, I like her. I'm like, well, I guess that's good. What are you talking about? And that's when it dawned on me that these decisions are made by large groups of people, and the people who you work with over the course of your career will be there in that moment that it really matters. And so my advice on sponsors is to try to notice who they are, and to also know that it's not necessarily enduring, right? People retire, they go in and out of favor, you move to other parts of the business. But one of the most common things that I talk to people about when they're stalled is I say, who cares about you? Who advocates for you? Who is your sponsor? And you'd be surprised so many people can't really answer that question, and that's why they're stalled, because there's just so much competition that if there isn't somebody pushing or pulling you, sure, you can still move ahead. I'm not saying you can't, but that's such a big part of the formula. And so I wish I had noticed that when I was in my 20s. So for all of you who are students here, pay attention. That'll start, by the way, in business school. You'll know who the professors, who are advocating for you, and just notice that, and notice how that relationship forms.
I would actually make a comment as well. So you heard a lot from Lauren, and a lot of it sounds like it's internal IBM, big corporate. The reality is I've been corporate, I've been entrepreneurial, and I will tell you, this is true all over the world, no matter where you are, how you're growing up, what's going on. The reality is these sponsors don't have to be within your own company. It's really important for you to make sure, and you guys have, the younger people in the crowd, even all of us today, have a phenomenal tool out there, whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook or just all of the social media. You have the opportunity and the ability to stay connected so much more than you ever did before. And I see this with my kids. I have a 25-year-old son, a 19-year-old daughter. My son's been to multiple countries, studied in lots of places, and he still talks to and stays connected with people that he hasn't seen in 5, 6, 7 years, which for him is a long time when you're 25. I think that for someone like Lauren, she has the benefit of having been in the same organization for a long time and therefore can farm that. It's much harder for folks like Lynne or myself or Amy who have moved around a lot. But it's all that much more important for you to make sure that you manage your network, you manage your sponsors, you know who they are, you track them. And by the way, it's not all about take, it's also about give. Because you'll be surprised how many people will come back to you at some point in your career and say, wow, you really helped me out when I was doing something and I was younger, or I worked for you and I want to do this for you now. So it can't be about what are you going to do for me. It has to be about how are you going to contribute into that environment and how can you continue to enhance not only your network, but everybody else's network. And if you really sit there and think about how can I help you, you'd be amazed how many people will come back and want to speak.
It's like a gift. I spend about half an hour every day on my network, thanks to the network tools that we have today. I think that's absolutely right on. A lot of people say to me, how do you have time to do that? And I just say, well, how do you not have time to do that? Because it comes back to you 1,000 ways.
And it's even simple. It's like, happy birthday. How are you doing? Just saw you got promoted. Congratulations. That's great. I mean, does not take a whole lot, but it means being engaged with your network on an ongoing basis. Right? So I want to go ahead and ask one more question, and then I think I'm going to open it up for questions if we can at that point. As we sit here and think about what we're doing today, we've heard a lot about leadership, a lot about trends, a lot about career. I'd like to ask the question, I think, Amy, I'm going to go ahead and ask you this. So what gets you up every morning and gets you to work? What gets you excited about what you're doing?
So I was reading an article about Tim O'Reilly from O'Reilly Media the other day. It's actually something that he wrote, and he said that spreading the word about innovation can change the world. And I'm not an innovator myself, so I probably really never will print my own shoes, but I certainly will talk to a lot of folks about innovation. And every day when I look around me, there's new things that are being invented. The work that my company's doing is making a huge difference to enterprises all over the world to enable them to run their businesses a different way. And when I wake up in the morning and I think, right now I have a title called Big Data Evangelist, it just can't get better than that. So I get to go out and talk to folks about what are their business challenges, help them think through the types of data they have in their business that can help them really make their products work better for their customers. And that's what gets me going every day, is just spreading the word about innovation and changing the world that way.
So Lynn, one of the questions that you really liked that you had on the sheet was, why is it important for companies to hire women in science, technology, engineering, and math?
Yeah, so one, women are half the population, people, come on. It's like, hey, and we're climbing up the economic ladder, so we're huge decision makers. But I think some of it's about a softer side of leadership and management, and I'm not trying to, I have 2 sons. I have only brothers. I usually only work with men. And I'm really proud of some of the softer skills that just seem to be based in gender, and I don't want to make male female or girl boy but I do think that the care and concern you can show for a workforce and the cultural sensitivity you have, some of it's because we're mothers. It's like I always said, parenthood was a great equalizer because it didn't matter who you were, where you came from. You got this package delivered, and it was out of your control. You could influence things, but you could never control. So you have to listen, you have to watch, you have to say, how does that person think? Why are they doing that? Why is my child doing that? But you can't say, just don't do that because I said so. So I just think there's something about learning and trying to interact and engage. And I just think we're half the population. We probably have half the ideas, and it's nice. I said if my children are lucky, the world will be ruled by a woman someday. But anyway, I just think you need to get the full spectrum of people, and it's age, it's race, it's gender, it's cultural. It's the more you bring together, the stronger the organization. I'm really happy that people are working to bring women in. It's a wonderful thing you're doing.
It's the epitome of crowd innovation, right? The more people involved with different perspectives, the more powerful it can be.
It's wonderful.
Right? So, Lauren, I'm going to hit you up with the one finance question for tonight. So, in your opinion, as you think about all the things we've been talking about, you talked a little while ago about margins, gross margins. What are the greatest impacts in your mind in terms of profitability?
Well, I think about that a lot because I think a lot about business models. So I think more than ever, because there's so much technology and because actually clients are changing, I find clients are much more sophisticated about IT than when I started. We were all learning. Now we work with clients who have done IT all their lives, or they've grown up with IT. They're more sophisticated. There are more buying choices. There's tremendous pressure on traditional business models. And I think that you have to really pay attention to the business model. And in paying attention to the business model, you can't just say, here's technology, we'll throw it out, you'll use it. I think most of the world's infrastructure has been built with the applying of technology to most of the commercial business processes. That's been built. Now we're in this phase where I think it's fuzzier because it's much more people related. And so I think we have to be more attuned to what our clients need. We need to understand the models. We need to understand where we make markets. And then the hard part then comes in terms of what's the go-to-market, how do you cover, how do you monetize, how to use all kinds of different channels. I think there's money to be made for sure because the technology, what's great about it is it's additive, right? It's not a field that's limited, it's additive. But the models are changing to be, I think, much more low margin or lower margins, higher volume, and we've got to react to that. One other thing I want to say is that when I was in my strategy job and I was studying what the market was doing, I uncovered a really amazing fact, which is that in the second half of 2012, there was $110 billion globally invested in technology in the form of startups, technology investments by tech companies, acquisitions, and even our clients. There's just so little, there's so few barriers to entry in this market now, and everybody's getting into technology because it really is a source of competitive advantage. And I think that we're all going to have to really look at how this whole shift is changing the whole economic dynamic and figure out how to monetize. There's a lot still to be done there in terms of the monetization. But again, I just go back to the basic, which is, what are customers buying? What is the right offer? How do you build your go-to-market? And how do you build a model that matches that and not take a model necessarily that's worked in the past with other technologies?
Great, wonderful. So we actually have a few minutes, and I'm happy to bring questions up to the panel. I can do a repeat on the mic if you want, or unless you've got a mic. Super. Right. Can I ask anybody if you've got a question, if you will step up to the mic?
Come up to the mic and ask your question. Don't be shy.
And just do us a favor and give us.
Sorry.
You know what? Do us a favor. Give us some context. Just let us know who you're with. If you're a student, if you're with a company, so we have some context.
I actually run my own $1 million company. Totally kidding. I'm a freshman business student. I'm studying international business at Northeastern. And just talking back to the concept of globalization, because I know that we were talking about that. IBM is a hugely global country. And I know that you were talking something about South Africa and you were talking about companies in China with the Olympics. And obviously Asia is a very big market right now. But I was wondering if there were any hidden gems that you would, up and coming countries or pockets that might be of interest that are not necessarily brought to a lot of attention or in the media a lot, but something that you feel like is important that's kind of being left by the wayside or that will be important soon.
So I'll answer a couple things there. I think, first of all, economics is a great thing to study because we all know things change on a daily basis. So really looking at the world and getting an understand of what countries are doing right now. But age differentiation is very interesting. And the developing nations tend to have younger populations. And so there can be certain products that can be targeted towards developing nations that might be of interest that aren't in some of the more well-developed nations. And then the other thing, too, is this idea that communication has gotten to a point where the barriers to entry are much lower, where cloud computing is enabling people to get into business, and where 3D printing can enable local manufacturing. There's an opportunity in developing nations that just didn't exist anymore. And a lot of those nations have natural resources that can be brought to bear. There's one company I was just reading about, which is it's called Just 3D Printing, and it's in India. And they're figuring out how to take plastic out of the trash and turn it into filaments to print different products. And so there's just so many different interesting things that can be done in some of these different nations.
Yeah, definitely agree. Definitely, I would say Africa is a great place to look at because of the build out of their core infrastructure, but also they'll be building out the core infrastructure with all the latest technologies. In fact, they'll leapfrog some of the mature markets because they're not tied to, technology that was developed maybe 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. People have largely invested, so they'll be making a lot of use of cloud computing, definitely mobile. They're putting in high-speed communications networks in Africa, and there's a tremendous amount of responsibility. But I do agree that there's actually there's opportunity everywhere. One of my favorite places was I went to Vietnam. I was the second executive from IBM into Vietnam, and I went by myself. And when I got off the plane, I was thinking, you really should have brought somebody with you, because when the guy came up to meet me, he was a little bit scary looking, but I thought, the hotel's only 5 miles from here. What could happen in 5 miles? But I got safely to the hotel, and then we went on to have this fabulous economic conference because Vietnam felt that if they could embrace technology, they could catch up to Singapore. And so the government was totally focused on technology. And of course, nowadays, it's really a hotbed of technology and innovation. So, I tell you that story in that sometimes just be brave and go somewhere because it's safe. I'm here. But you'll see things that you can't really see from a distance. And I couldn't see what was going on in Vietnam from a distance. I had to be there in the country, in the meetings, meeting with the CIO of the country to see what they were thinking and what the tremendous opportunity. Later, we invested a cloud lab in Vietnam. So, but definitely, hands down, for sure, Africa.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Somebody else?
Sorry, not trying to hog the mic. I'm also a freshman studying international business at Northeastern. I was curious, I heard a lot of you guys talking about the interesting upcoming trends, specifically the 3D printing. Like, how do you see the the newfound consumer access to these technologies? How do you see that influencing the markets and the products that we're now using now, like the smartphones and the tablets?
You want to try that one?
That's a really interesting question. So, I think our view is companies don't always have the best ideas. So you need to engage and develop and put tools in the hands of people who can innovate and try and add to the, intellectual capital of a firm. So we're trying to use social applications and running contests. We're trying to engage people to see what's possible using 3D, and then figure out if some of these are going to spin up into companies. There's a guy that we're working with in France who started his own company to work with the models that are on our cloud-hosted website, because we put some things up there, and he's figured out a way to really quickly print them. So I go grab a model, and then I say I want the Opera House in Australia, and it's 2 days later it's delivered to me, and it's this beautiful thing, and it's a different way to teach. And not everybody learns by listening, not everybody learns by reading. Some people learn by touching and seeing and taking it apart. So I think there's a whole, I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I think there's a whole bunch of opportunities, and we need to get more people, and that's why we need to do STEM, and we need to be in early education, and we need to involve people, because we don't know where the best ideas are.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Question?
Oh, I'm from Russia, which is the most corrupted country in the world. It's the fact.
Show this clip on YouTube.
So I have a question about corruption and bribes in modern business, around the world, and your companies in particular. Yeah.
How about if I take that one?
Yes, that would be great. I'd be happy if you take that one.
So actually, the interesting part today is it's getting harder and harder and harder and harder for business to do business in countries where bribes are commonplace. Many of the US-based companies, UK, Brazil, many of the international organizations have implemented new regulations that cause extreme pain and tremendous fines that these organizations have to pay. And the reality is, in most times, there's a phenomenal, and the reason I'm answering this is so they don't have to be very honest with you, but the reality is within any corporation, any major corporation, anti-bribery, anti-corruption is a massive educational effort for their internal employees, and it's something that they've been doing for years and years and years. But if you look at what's been happening in the world, all of the major bribes have not come through the companies. It's come as a result of one of their third parties, an agent, a broker, a subcontractor, someone that's doing business on their behalf who's potentially local in that country and attempts to do business in the way of the country. And what's changed is that the new regulations, the new laws, now hold the corporations accountable for the behavior of their third parties. So if a third party pays a bribe to benefit your corporation, even if it isn't you, but it's somebody that's in your supply chain, there are multi-million, multi-billion-dollar fines coming out on these issues. And it's not just the cost of the fine, it's the cost of everything else that you have to do to satisfy the SEC. It's the cost of all the retraining. It's the bad news of having your name blasted on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. So I think it's changing. I think it will continue to change, and it's one of the absolute most critical things that's going on today in regulatory environments. Department of Justice here, the UK Bribery Act, Brazil, you will see more and more of it coming up over the next few years. Sure.
Anybody else have any other answers? I'm just curious about.
I thought that was a great answer.
Definitely.
Hello, hi, I'm Connie from IBM. I'm a program manager in the cloud. I make sure the offerings get in the cloud like they should, and customers can access the offering in the cloud. My question is, well, really, I volunteer quite a lot. I'm thankful that IBM allows its employees to go back into the schools, primarily the middle schools, and I've been to 3 or 4 middle schools in the Boston area. And I have watched many young girls, 12, 13, whatever, they have no interest in engineering. They think it's boring, ugly, and just not attractive. And to convince them to change their minds would require a personal investment in each and every one of those girls. And frankly, the capacity to do so is beyond me, but I'm just wondering if any of you have any comments. It's a lost. I don't want to present it like a complete negative, but it is a huge undertaking to get these girls who would be our pipeline to think differently about engineering.
So I think that's a great point. And one of the best ways to change something that's cultural is to change the stories that we talk about. So even having this type of event will enable us to have a new community of people that can share our ideas about women in technology. And with the types of communication that we have today, we should be able to get more and more stories out there that showcase women in technology, that make it's not boring, it's really exciting, so that young girls can see this. And I agree. I mean, there's the personal touch. So my own daughter is about to finish her PhD in quantitative psychology. So she went the total technical route. And that was easy for me because we had that personal connection. But I think we need to take events like this. We need to take communities like this, and we need to get the stories out there, because those are the types of stories that young girls need to see, that they can be successful in these types of fields.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need a TV show. And
reality.
Like, you know, there was LA Law, and you know, all these, everybody became a lawyer. I've stood in those classrooms too. It's really hard, you know, when the girls are just looking away. My own daughter taught me a lesson. I thought I had it all figured out, and then she veered off into screenwriting. I was horrified. Remember, David was there. I told David about it about 5 blocks. He said, don't worry, don't worry. But then she came back in, and I learned something about her which was hard for me to learn, which is that for her, she exhibits her technology expertise through gaming. And actually, she's a great programmer, writer, and artist. And after I got over the fact that I didn't like the games, I actually realized that that was a way that she was expressing her love of technology that I couldn't see. So I just want to underscore this story with one other story that reinforced it. I like to participate in it as a sponsor or a judge in an organization in New York called Technovation, where girls from different middle schools and high schools compete to create an app, and they go through the whole venture, present your business plan, and one gets selected and the app is funded. 2 years ago, every single thing that they did was a study app that was a game. And here I had been a snob against games, but I was born again and I saw that gaming was good. And the game that won was a periodic table using Where's Waldo. So one girl was an artist. She drew the elements in the art. Another girl programmed it on the Android. Another girl built the business plan. And so I started to think, am I not on their wavelength? And I don't know what the answer is, honestly, Connie, but for me, I've had to come back around to my daughter's wavelength to connect with her on technology. And then watching all those young women do marvelous things all around gaming started to change my mind in terms of, is there a path in for girls? Maybe not all girls, but is it a different path than traditionally I've been comfortable with? And by the way, my daughter did go back and study computer science. David was right. Thank you.
I guess I'd just like to follow up on the gaming thing, because part of my business in consumer was experimenting with game development platforms. We actually did some pilots with people who got National Science Foundation grants to study learning and to figure out, is a classic teacher curriculum the best? Can you do something with an interactive game and teach a kid how to build a house or how to manage scarcity like in SimCity, or is it a combination? So there's two things from that experiment. It's not complete yet, but that I wanted to call out. One is it was a game environment, and when you put girls and boys in the room in the gaming, it was somewhat dominated by the guys who were just much more, they just wanted to go with the PC, and they wanted the game, and they wanted to control, and they wanted to win, and you saw the girls kind of stepping back. So I think we do need to encourage our girls to explore and to game and create and do Waldo in the periodic chart. That's a great idea. And then, so part one, I'm trying to think of part two. Oh, and the other thing that was really interesting is the people who signed up to be in this pilot, it was oversubscribed by teachers. I mean, the teachers wanted to engage in this as a way to teach and learn and communicate more effectively with their students, which is another way to say maybe we have to embrace gaming a little bit. And it's a path. It's a path.
It's also recognizing that technology isn't just about, if you think about the guys, they all get on and they play the games where they shoot them up, kill them, do all that kind of stuff, right? If you watch the girls, the young girls who are playing the little games where the people are bouncing around and they're collecting cherries or collecting little gold bricks, they love that game, but they don't. They lose them when they get into the blood and the gore and the guts of the mid-teenage years, where the guys are really excited about gaming and the girls just go, yeah, this is just not into my thing. But I think the other thing you need to recognize, there's a lot of other uses of technology, and oftentimes, I don't know about you all, but I didn't have a clue what I was going to do when I was 12 or 13. But there were certain things that girls potentially gravitate towards more and don't realize the heavy use of technology in those: design, architecture, interior design, even product design. Civil engineering, mechanical engineering, maybe a hard sell, but you talk about it from a design perspective. You want to design a building, you need to be an architect. You want to be able to design a product, you need to. So there's different ways to come at it, but certainly recognizing that maybe helping them understand the breadth of opportunities that technology can bring them is a good part of it. Okay.
Maybe we could still have a business school TV show.
All right, great.
Very glamorous.
We are just now at 5 of 8, just before 5 of 8, and I think we were targeting completion at 8. Looks like we're fine on questions. What I'd like to do is just say thank you so much to the panel. I really appreciate everything. Wonderful, wonderful insights. Any final comments that you all have before we turn it back over to Kate?
Anybody else have any last questions? Actually, I do. Okay. All right. We do a couple more then?
Sure.
Jump up to the mic.
Yeah, you need to go up to the mic.
And tell us who you are and where you're from.
I'm Soraya. I'm from Uzbekistan, and I'm a freshman in business school too. And Actually, I was curious because I've never seen my own mom work or any of my aunts or relatives, women relatives, and I can see you're all beautiful mothers. And I was like wondering, does the work you do get on the way of doing the housework or like spending time with your family and all that?
It definitely does. Someone wise once said to me, you can have everything in life, you just can't have it all at the same time. And I think that during your career, there's certain times that you need to make decisions that you're going to spend a little bit more time going to the bake sales. By the way, on the bake sale thing, I would just go to a bakery and buy the cupcakes and put them in something that made it look like I had made them. So I didn't do that part of it. But you just make decisions along that path, and it's a long path. I mean, life is long, so there's plenty of time to get all of everything that you want to do in there. You just can't do it all at the same time.
Yeah, one of the things that I actually can't even bake, so they would prefer probably to have those cupcakes. What I found over the years is if I understood my priorities, then I could manage the challenge. So for instance, I decided that economic freedom was a priority for my family. And I didn't mean economic freedom in that we wanted to be wealthy. I meant it in terms of, we went and spent a week doing relief work in Biloxi after Katrina, and we could afford to do that. So that was, for me, a definition of economic freedom. So when I framed it like that in my head, it didn't matter to me so much when I did Saturday morning sales cadence calls as it did when I thought it had to be balanced. When I thought it had to be 50-50, I would get more irritated when things bled over into each other. So prioritization, and I think you said knowing yourself and what matters most to you, and then looking at life that way. And of course, it's going to be a challenge in certain times of your life. If you have a little baby or, a young child and you've got to pick them up and you're stuck in traffic and no one's there to pick them up, and you go there and they start screaming and crying that they're the last child, it breaks your heart. But, on the other hand, my daughter went off to Japan for 3 weeks when she was a sophomore in high school, which was tremendously exciting. So it's just a balance and trying to look at the bigger part of what you're trying to achieve. It's easy for us to say because we've been through it, but if you could just remember a little of that, I think it'll help.
I also would suggest don't be afraid to outsource. There are going to be some things you don't need to outsource.
Like housework, who needs
right?
that?
But outsource the housework. In your list of priorities, it's probably not the most important thing you have to worry about.
It's just, I was wondering because my mom never worked, and I was curious, is it easy to manage all that at the same time?
No, it's not.
So I
just
want to say, I used to say my mom didn't work, and she started work when she was 45. But I think that the way we might think about that is your mother didn't work outside the home, because in the home there's a lot of work going on, and she's a very talented woman to raise you, and there's a lot of work that goes on in the home that you either do it or you outsource it. So,
like for instance, I bet you didn't eat spaghetti for dinner 4 nights a week, like at our house, because
yes, because there was
we had no groceries.
Great. So I think we have one more question over here.
Yes. This is kind of a market and a career question. I'm also the 35 years in the technology world end of things. And as you all talked eloquently about how bringing products to market and bringing technologies to market has changed and what is different now and so forth. And it made me wonder, in the business side, in the bringing products to market side and all of that, and in the career side, what did you learn 30 years ago that is wrong now, is completely wrong? What's changed both from a business and a career point of view?
I forget. Actually, I think the one biggest thing is if you think about 30 years ago, a lot of folks would embark on a career and they would know which steps they were going to take, and they would pretty much stay with the same company in the same field. And if anything, what I've learned is you need to keep learning. And if you keep learning and you keep going on to the next thing that you're passionate about, you'll be successful in your career, your professional life, and your personal life.
And I would say it's not just the last 30 years, right? The reality is any student starting college today in any one of these degrees that we're talking about, 50% of what they learn in their freshman and sophomore year will no longer be valid by the time they're a junior or a senior. So if anything else, I would say the pace of change is so rapid today that what we learned 30 years ago has been turned over so many times that it's easy to forget.
Right.
Yeah, I forgot too, but I think back then everything was so structured, and there was comfort in that structure. As you recall, you did this, you did that, you had a big office, blah blah blah. I just think you have to be nimble now, and I didn't learn how to do that 35 years ago. I was presented with a progression and a pace which you could tell, are you going fast enough or not, and it didn't really deviate. My first 10 years of my career. And now I look back and say, well, it's probably a strong foundation, but we're not bound to that today, which I think is really empowering.
So I just have to add, for me, 30 years ago, I thought there was structure, there was hierarchy. I thought the guys running the company had the answers. And, over time, I became a guy kind of running something. And I always said to people, I know you think we're all silly or dumb or we don't get it, but if you don't talk to us and tell us what's really going on, how will we ever know? So it's like, but I always thought of course they know what's going on. It's so ridiculous here. Of course they know. And then you get there and it's like, you have no clue. And you need people to, mentor and sponsor and enroll them. And you need to listen to customers. And it's like, you don't have the answers. You have the questions.
Great, thank you. Is that it?
So I just want to make one comment.
On the mic? Thank you.
So I'm an alumni of Northeastern. I want to thank all of you. You did a great job. And so I actually went to the mechanical engineering school. I have a bachelor's and a master's from here in the mechanical.
And sorry, what is your name?
Joan Cullinane.
Oh, yes, because I've been communicating,
yes.
but I don't know your faces.
Yes.
So yes.
So I work at Oracle, and I've been there a long time. And I wanted to address just this last question about family and balance. So I actually have 6 children. So I thought it was worth telling you all that. Wow. I'm a graduate of Northeastern. I have 2 engineering degrees, and I went back 10 years after I was in my career and went and got an MBA. Ooh, and at that time is when I said, oh, good time to go. We've had a few children. Good time to go. I'm going to get a little break here. So I was accepted into the MBA program, and I found out I was pregnant right after that. So while I went back to school, so I want to say to everyone that they're all healthy, they're all doing great, and I know that everyone's always concerned about having a family. My husband and I made the decision that the career wasn't going to limit the family, but we needed to figure out how to do this together, and we actually had a great time doing it. And they're all very successful, 6 kids. I got 4 in college right now, and they're all actually in engineering programs.
Oh my God!
And not that one actually just entered MIT Harvard's combined PhD program. So I'm actually extremely happy. So it can work out. So I just want to say that although I wasn't there for every meal, and I was the mother that never came in and picked them up in the right direction at the school, and always got in trouble. Mom, you did it again. You went the wrong way. They all made out pretty good in life. So I just want to let you know it does work out. So.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Weren't they wonderful? I'll give all 4 applause.